One of the most difficult design challenges is representing a lot of data clearly. It's easy to throw a bunch of numbers and dates on a page, but to make them readable, you typically need to format it all as a table. Now, InDesign offers a number of features that make table making, well, not fun, but at least pretty tolerable, and sometimes even interesting. My friend Diane Burns has done a whole title on making cool-looking tables here on the lynda.com online training library. You should definitely check that out. But in the meantime, I'm going to show you the essentials, what you need to do to get up and running with tables quickly. Now, the first thing you need to know about tables in InDesign is that they're always anchored inside of a text frame, and they flow along with text in the story. I have my catalog file open here from the exercise files folder, and I'm going to zoom down to the bottom part of this left-hand page. Now, all these guides here are a little bit distracting to me, so I'm going to go to the View menu, choose Grids and Guides, and then turn off my guides. Now I'm going to make a text frame. I'll choose the Type tool and drag out a frame. Now that I have a frame, I can insert my table. So to do that, I'll go to my Table menu and choose Insert Table. The Insert Table dialog box lets me choose the number of rows and columns and also specify header and footer rows. I'll talk about those later on in this chapter. For now, I'll just click OK, and you can see that InDesign has inserted this table. It's a very basic table, but it does let me type data into it. So I can just type some words, and then press the Tab key to jump from one field to the next, and then type some more words. Now, in general, you're not going to be creating your own tables from scratch. It's just too cumbersome. The table data will probably come from somewhere else, like Word or Excel, or some database. So let's go ahead and get rid of this table and start with a new one. You can delete a table just like you would delete text or an anchored object. In fact, a table is anchored in the text. So if I click down here in the empty part of this text frame, you'll see that the text cursor is placed immediately after the table. In fact, I can just start typing some gibberish here, and you'll see that it adds it after the table. It's part of one story. So to delete the table, we simply drag over it and hit Delete. I'll drag over that text and the table, and then I'll hit the Delete key. Once again, it's just like a character in your text story. Okay, now let's bring in some data. I'm going to go to the File menu and choose Place. Here in my exercise files folder, I'm going to grab this RU catalog data file, the one that ends with .txt. Then I'll click Open, and you'll see that all that data comes into my text frame. It's definitely not pretty, so let's turn it into a table. I'm going to select all this text by pressing Command-A or Control-A on Windows, go up to my Table menu, and choose Convert Text to Table. Now, InDesign is going to ask me, what's in between each row and column? In this case, the columns are broken down by tabs and the rows by paragraphs. So I'm going to leave this set to the default settings and just click OK. As you can see, we now have a table really quickly. But I remember seeing just a moment ago, there's a lot more data than I can see in this table. So if you look in the lower right corner of this text frame, you'll see an overset mark. This text frame is overset. The table is too long to fit in here. Let's zoom back to 100% by pressing Command-1 or Control-1 on Windows, and then I'm going to use my Selection tool to make this text frame longer. When I do that, you can see a little bit more data, but it's still overset. So let's thread it to a new frame. I'll click on the overset marker, and then I'll scroll over here to the other side of my page, and I'm going to drag out a new frame. InDesign automatically threads from one frame to the next, and you can see the continuation of that table. So as you can see, tables can thread from one frame to another, and if you have a really long table like this one, it could go on for pages. Now, the one thing InDesign cannot do, however, is break a cell in half. For example, this cell up here, this whole row, has to stay together. InDesign can't put the first line on page 1 and the second line on page 2. It always keeps your cell whole on a page. The other thing I'm noticing here, it's kind of interesting, is that this table is wider than the frame itself. This is one of the few instances in InDesign where things can actually hang outside of a text frame. I'm going to talk about how to change the size of a table by adjusting its rows and columns later on in this chapter. But for right now, I want to point out that each one of these cells is kind of like its own text frame. I can switch to the Type tool and click inside here just by double-clicking on it, and then I can edit the text in here. I'll delete that and type in some new text. Now, I know this table isn't exactly pretty, but at least we now have a table to work with. In the next few movies, I'm going to explain how to adjust the rows and columns and then start formatting these cells.